After things had temporarily settled down, a few days later, Emperor Yangfeng summoned his second son, Ling Yushio, back from the border. He spoke with him about the responsibilities he would have to undertake. Several more days passed, and Emperor Yangfeng began to feel that his body was slightly unwell. He consequently conferred Ling Yushio as the new crown prince and ordered him to supervise the empire and handle all political affairs on his behalf. Emperor Yangfeng then summoned Crown Prince Ling Yushio and asked him what he believed should be the first thing he did after taking control of the government. Emperor Yangfeng did not originally have a particularly high opinion of this second son. Among all his children, Ling Yushio was not considered the most outstanding. His determination was not the strongest. And his aptitude was not the greatest either. Emperor Yangfeng had once admired Ling Yushio greatly because Ling Yushio possessed determination, courage, and outstanding aptitude. Unfortunately, Ling Yushio's determination and courage had become excessive, making him too bold and too resolute. Emperor Yangfeng's other elder sons had also died too early while waiting for him to step down from the throne, leaving Ling Yushio as the remaining candidate. Ling Yushio had just returned from the battlefield, and the several months he had spent there had given him a more pressing heroic spirit and greater decisiveness than before. Because he had not been in the capital when Ling Yushio colluded with Dao sect in Great Thunderclap Monastery and launched the rebellion, Ling Yushio had avoided the disaster entirely. When asked what he would do first, Ling Yushio solemnly began by saying that he would abolish the arrangements made by his elder brother. Emperor Yangfeng immediately interrupted him, saying that Ling Yushio was now the eldest son and that he did not have a son like Ling Yushio anymore. Ling Yushio paused and then explained his actual plan. He intended to abolish the treaties that Ling Yushio had signed with foreign countries and recover the lands that had been given away. Afterward, he would purge the sects that had taken advantage of the chaos to seize and swallow up territory. Since Dao sect and Great Thunderclap Monastery had already suffered a devastating defeat and lost a huge number of their experts, Ling Yushio planned to take back more than half of the territories belonging to those two great sacred grounds. Emperor Yangfeng's expression softened slightly and he asked what Ling Yushio would do after that. Ling Yushio answered that he would help his father carry out disaster relief. However, before beginning the relief efforts, he intended to write a decree confessing his own crimes and pray to heaven not to send further disasters, thereby calming and appeasing the hearts of the citizens. Hearing this, Emperor Yangfeng suddenly became furious and shouted at him to repeat what he had said. Ling Yushio bowed and solemnly repeated that he would first write a decree confessing his crimes and pray for heaven to stop sending disasters so that the people's hearts could be appeased. Emperor Yangfeng remained grim and coldly asked who had taught him this idea. Ling Yushio was momentarily stunned and did not immediately answer. Emperor Yangfeng became even angrier and demanded again to know who had taught him. He stood up and walked back and forth in anger, explaining that he was Ling Yushio's father and knew his son extremely well. He knew that Ling Yushio could not have come up with such a political strategy by himself. These were not the thoughts that the second prince would normally have. They were ideas that could only be understood by someone standing in the position of the emperor. Therefore, Emperor Yangfeng demanded that Ling Yushio tell him who had taught him. Under the pressure, cold sweat appeared on Ling Yushio's forehead. He finally gritted his teeth and honestly explained that after returning to the capital, he had visited the Imperial preceptor. At that time, he happened to encounter Palace Grandee treating the Imperial preceptor's injuries. Ling Yushio had discussed with the two of them the possibility that his father would question him about political affairs as a test. Because he did not know how to answer such questions, he had asked them for ideas. Emperor Yangfeng's anger then began to subside. He calmly asked which of them had suggested that Ling Yushio write a decree confessing his crimes. Ling Yushio answered that both the Imperial preceptor and Palace Grandee had suggested it. They had reasoned that the current calamities were the actions of heavenly gods. So it would be better to follow heaven's will and make their plans slowly instead of openly resisting the heavenly gods. If they directly opposed heaven, they would only be defeated. They therefore believed that it would be better for Ling Yushio to write the decree confessing his crimes than for Emperor Yangfeng himself to do so. If Emperor Yangfeng wrote such a decree, it would appear that the emperor was denying the reforms and taking responsibility for them. However, because Ling Yushio was the crown prince, he could write the decree while merely pretending to show civility and humility. Emperor Yangfeng's expression gradually softened, and he sat down. He explained that he understood Ling Yushio's abilities, wisdom, courage, and insight, precisely because he knew his son so well. He knew Ling Yushio would not yet have thought of such a strategy by himself. That was why he had deliberately become angry. Even though he was testing Ling Yushio about politics, he did not want his son to simply repeat the answers that others had taught him. Ling Yushio needed to express his own understanding and develop his own judgment. Ling Yushio acknowledged his father's words. Emperor Yangfeng then sighed and revealed his deeper concern. He said that he was not particularly worried about the imperial preceptor, but he was worried about Palace Grandee. He feared that one day, after both Emperor Yangfeng and the imperial preceptor were gone, Ling Yushio might be unable to surpass Palace Grandee and would therefore be manipulated or outmaneuvered by him. Emperor Yangfeng's cultivation had already been lost, and his divine treasures had been destroyed. Recovering his cultivation would be extremely difficult. Because of this, he had made Ling Yushio supervise the empire and manage all political affairs. He warned Ling Yushio that he needed to be cautious and conscientious. If Emperor Yangfeng could not recover his cultivation, then his remaining lifespan would be at most around 50 years. After those years passed, Ling Yushio would become the emperor. Therefore, Ling Yushio needed to broaden his horizons, broaden his mind, and learn to think independently rather than relying on other people's guidance. At the same time, on Saint Arrival Mountain of the Heavenly Devil cult, Qin Mu led the hallmasters, elders, and other members of the cult to the graves of Heavenly King Qian and Heavenly King Lu. Heavenly King Lu had left behind only a pile of ashes, while Heavenly King Qian's body had never been found. Because of this, the graves contained the clothes that the two heavenly kings had worn when they were alive. Qin Mu personally stepped forward and placed Crown Prince Ling Yushio's head in front of their graves. Everyone then lit incense and paid their respects to the two heavenly kings. Heavenly King Yu prayed that if the spirits of the two heavenly kings could hear them, they could now rest in peace. He said that heaven was currently sending disasters upon the world, meaning troubled times and calamities were unavoidable. He asked the two senior heavenly king brothers to protect their sacred cult during the coming chaos. After everyone finished paying their respects, they gradually dispersed. Heavenly King Yu remained beside Qin Mu. After hesitating for a moment, he asked whether the cult master still intended to return to eternal peace. Qin Mu nodded and confirmed that he did. Heavenly King Yu was confused and worried. He pointed out that the Heavenly Saint cult had helped capture the Imperial preceptor, killed the fake emperor, and killed numerous powerful experts from Dao sect and Great Thunderclap Monastery. Because of this, he feared that Emperor Yangfeng would become suspicious and guard against the Heavenly Saint cult. He therefore wondered whether Qin Mu was not worried about returning to eternal peace after everything that had happened. Qin Mu looked calmly at the gravestones of Heavenly King Qian and Heavenly King Lu and explained that Dao sect and Great Thunderclap Monastery were still alive. Those two great sacred grounds were therefore the emperor's most important targets. Emperor Yangfeng would first need to eliminate them before he could consider moving against the Heavenly Saint cult. As long as Dao sect and Great Thunderclap Monastery remained, the emperor would not directly attack the Heavenly Saint cult. Only after those two enemies had been dealt with would the Heavenly Saint cult need to become cautious. For the present, there was no reason to worry. Heavenly King Yu thought about Qin Mu's reasoning and realized that it was indeed logical. Qin Mu then walked toward the sacred tree and gently touched its patterns. He raised his head and looked toward its crown before asking Heavenly King Yu a profound question: whether they truly believed that human beings could change the great Tao of heaven and earth. Heavenly King Yu once again modestly claimed that he was naturally dull and that the question was too profound for him to answer. Nevertheless, he offered his understanding through the example of roads. In ancient times, there had been no roads. As more and more people repeatedly walked along the same paths, a road gradually appeared. Later, people disliked walking through mud whenever it rained, so they covered the roads with stone slabs, making them easier to travel. After that, people felt that walking was too slow, so they invented wheels and vehicles. Horse carriages were then able to move rapidly along those roads. Heavenly King Yu reasoned that there had originally been no road for horse carriages. But after humans created one, something new had been added to the great Tao of heaven and earth. Qin Mu was stunned by his words. Heavenly King Yu continued explaining that human beings had kept creating new things whenever existing methods became insufficient. When horse carriages were considered too slow, People invented flying ships that could travel through the sky. When people lacked copper and gold, they extracted those metals from ores. When ordinary letters could not reach distant places quickly enough, people created flying mail. In Heavenly King Yu's view, every new thing created by humans represented another addition to the great Tao of heaven and earth, causing that great Tao to gradually expand. Qin Mu fell into a slight daze as he listened. He looked at the sacred tree and noticed that it had only one main trunk. But from that trunk countless branches extended. And from those branches even more branches grew. Seeing this, Qin Mu could not help smiling because the tree seemed to embody the process Heavenly King Yu had described. Heavenly King Yu continued with more examples. In the past, when winter arrived in the north, people there found it difficult to obtain fresh fruits and vegetables. Now, however, flying ships could transport fruits and vegetables from the south to the north within only a few days. In the past, certain places had been extremely inhospitable, with demons roaming throughout their natural environments. Now humans could use spells to transform the terrain, turning barren mountains and wild rivers into green hills and clear waters. In the past, infertile land could produce only a small amount of crops, but humans had learned to transform infertile land into fertile fields. Heavenly King Yu then pointed out that wind, rain, thunder, and lightning had once been purely natural meteorological phenomena, but humans could now control these forces. He therefore asked Qin Mu whether humans had already changed the great Tao of heaven and earth through all these creations and transformations. Qin Mu nodded and smiled, answering that he believed they had. Heavenly King Yu then began to call himself naturally dull again, but Qin Mu immediately interrupted him. He told Heavenly King Yu that he was not dumb at all and that he was a capable person who did not need to constantly humble himself. Qin Mu then asked what Heavenly King Yu had wanted to ask him. Heavenly King Yu finally returned to Qin Mu's earlier statement that Emperor Yangfeng might eventually move against the Heavenly Saint cult after eliminating Dao sect in Great Thunderclap Monastery. He asked whether Qin Mu had already prepared any countermeasures. He even suggested that perhaps Qin Mu himself could become emperor. Qin Mu firmly shook his head and rejected the idea. He said that as long as the things Emperor Yangfeng was doing were similar to the goals of the Heavenly Saint cult, it did not matter whether Qin Mu became emperor or not. Moreover, the Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor had now become the fourth heavenly king of their sacred cult. Unless something unexpected happened to the Imperial Preceptor, Qin Mu did not believe Emperor Yangfeng would move against the Heavenly Saint cult. Qin Mu also believed that eliminating Dao sect and Great Thunderclap Monastery would not be as easy as Heavenly King Yu imagined. Finally, Qin Mu told Heavenly King Yu not to think too far ahead because he had come to eternal peace for only two purposes: to gain experience and to cultivate. Qin Mu left Saint Arrival Mountain and returned to Imperial College. Jiu Linuan immediately came to welcome him and held a banquet for him. Qin Mu was both amused and speechless at the excessive welcome and asked whether it was necessary. Jiu Linuan explained that, as fellow practitioners of the Devil Path, they naturally had to support each other. Then asked whether Qin Mu was satisfied with Junior Protector Sword. Qin Mu said that he was satisfied and would not return it, citing the rules of the Great Ruins. Jiu Linuan laughed and said that he knew those rules well because he had lived in the Great Ruins for 200 years. Anything obtained through one's own abilities after being scammed was never returned. He joked that Qin Mu should not regard him as an outsider because the Great Ruins could be considered partly his homeland, making them half fellow countrymen. Since Qin Mu had just returned from their homeland, Jiu Linuan felt that he should treat him to a meal to ease his homesickness. Qin Mu praised Jiu Linuan's realm and said that he admired him, while Jiu Linuan modestly praised Qin Mu as a talented youth and born hero. After exchanging compliments, Jiu Linuan sighed that when he had first met Qin Mu in the Great Ruins, he had immediately realized that Qin Mu was no ordinary talent and was destined for rapid success. But he had never expected Qin Mu to rise so quickly. Jiu Linuan then deliberately changed his form of address and asked whether Qin Mu could help him because, due to recent events, many positions among the first and second ranking officials of the imperial court had become vacant. Qin Mu was caught between laughter and tears and reminded him that he was merely a fifth-ranking official. Jiu Linuan told him that if Qin Mu did not regard him as an outsider, he could simply call him Linuan. Qin Mu explained that although he was a fifth-ranking palace grandee, He possessed no real authority and had no right to interfere with the promotion of first and second-ranking officials. More importantly, the sword that had killed the crown prince was precisely the junior protector sword he had obtained from Jiu Linuan. So Emperor Yangfeng already held resentment toward him and had concerns about the heavenly saint cult. If Qin Mu tried to speak to the emperor on Jiu Linuan's behalf, it might actually harm Jiu Linuan rather than help him. Jiu Linuan immediately acknowledged that Qin Mu was correct and proposed a toast to him. His real purpose in holding the banquet had never been to ask Qin Mu for help with his promotion. Instead, he wanted to establish a relationship with Qin Mu and settle the grudges between them. Regardless of whether Qin Mu was currently favored by the emperor, Jiu Linuan knew that he needed to be on good terms with him. The heavenly devil cult master stood at the same level as figures such as Rulai and Dao Master. So forming a good relationship with Qin Mu was effectively equivalent to forming a relationship with either of them. If this could be achieved through merely one banquet, Jiu Linuan considered it a very worthwhile bargain. After the banquet, Jiu Linuan personally escorted Qin Mu back to Scholar's residence. On the way, Qin Mu noticed that many foreigners were now present at Imperial College and became puzzled. Jiu Linuan explained that after the rebellion, the new crown prince had abolished the treaty that the renegade had signed and reclaimed the territories that had been ceded. Some foreign countries had become frightened by this development and therefore sent peaceful envoys to Eternal Peace to study its culture. The crown prince had permitted foreigners to come to Eternal Peace to seek knowledge. While descendants of aristocratic families were also studying at Imperial College, Qin Mu accepted the explanation, but then suddenly noticed a familiar young man and called out, "Pangong so." The young man, a member of the barbarian race from the prairie and the youngest son of the barbarian D Empire's Khan, turned around with a puzzled expression. Numerous retainers from his foreign country followed him, including 2 great shamans of Roland's Golden Palace. Pangong So quietly asked someone beside him about Qin Mu, and one of the great shamans whispered an explanation into his ear. Pangong So then seemed to understand and gave Qin Mu an indifferent greeting, addressing him as the heavenly devil cult master and asking what he wanted. Qin Mu was stunned because Pangong So clearly did not recognize him. He simply shook his head and said that there was nothing. Pangong So and the others then continued walking away. Qin Mu frowned and remained deep in thought. Jiu Linuan noticed his reaction and asked whether he knew Pangong So. Qin Mu explained that Pangong So was the youngest son of the barbarian D Empire's Khan. He had once seen Pangong So practicing his punches at the border, and the young man's fist techniques had possessed an unusual bearing that seemed to originate from a special constitution. Qin Mu also remembered that Pangong So had once challenged Chancellor Ba Shan and declared that he would definitely defeat Ba Shan in the future, which had left a deep impression on him. Yet now Pangong So acted as though he had never met Qin Mu before. Jiu Linuan merely suggested that Pangong So might have forgotten because he was young. Qin Mu eventually returned to Scholar's residence, where the dragon Qilin was lying outside the house. When Qin Mu entered his room, he immediately felt that something was wrong because the place was empty, lonely, and messy. He silently thought that if Hu Linger were there, she would certainly have tidied everything and arranged the room comfortably. At that moment, the dragon Qilin's deep voice came from outside as he asked a young woman whom she was looking for. The woman asked whether Cult Master Qin was present. The dragon Qilin answered that he was, and she said that she was going inside. Qin Mu immediately walked out and saw Ling Yushio pushing open the door. Ling Yushio had become an attractive young woman, smiling brightly with red lips and white teeth. She wore a gown with a red overlap and collar, and her youthful vitality immediately affected Qin Mu, causing his heart to beat faster. She cheerfully greeted him as the one who herds cows, and remarked that the big dog at his door was quite easy to talk to. Qin Mu immediately retaliated by saying that he intended to put the dragon Qilin on the table for the next New Year's dinner because he could not even guard a door properly. The dragon Qilin immediately protested from outside that he had heard everything. Qin Mu deliberately said that he wanted him to hear it because the dragon Qilin did nothing but eat and sleep. Qin Mu then carefully examined Ling Yushio and noticed that she had become increasingly beautiful. Although her face still retained some childish innocence, she was taller than Qin Mu and had grown into a mature young lady. Her spring gown emphasized her youthful figure, making Qin Mu have difficulty moving his gaze away. Qin Mu himself had also begun growing taller rapidly, like weeds appearing frantically in spring after a desolate land received new life. The last time they had met, Ling Yushio had still been a wild and carefree girl who wore male clothing. But she had now changed considerably. Ling Yushio walked to the yellow pear tree in the courtyard and saw that it had only produced small buds. The flowers still needed to open before the stamens could emerge from the tender petals. She stretched out her slender hands and gently played with the flowers, saying that Qin Mu was interesting for planting a pear tree on a jade mountain and that she would definitely return to admire it once the pear blossoms opened. Qin Mu suddenly became interested and told her not to move, asking her to maintain her current posture while he quickly brought out his brush, ink, paper, and inkstone. He began painting her beside the pear tree. Ling Yushio grew impatient because her arm was becoming sore and repeatedly asked whether he was finished. Qin Mu told her that he would be done immediately. When he was about to complete the painting, he deliberately stopped before making the final stroke. He first took out his seal and stamped it onto the painting, then immediately placed the final stroke and declared that it was finished. Ling Yushio came over to examine the painting and saw that Qin Mu had captured her appearance extremely accurately, including the slight shyness visible on her face. She admired how lifelike it was and asked why he had stamped his seal before making the final stroke. Qin Mu explained that his painting skills were too good. If he completed the final stroke first, she might walk out of the painting and run away. He said that the stamp was also a seal and explained that the image on it was not his surname but a type of sealing rune. Ling Yushio leaned closer to inspect the seal, causing the two of them to huddle together. Qin Mu's gaze shifted toward her face, where he saw the soft redness on her fair cheek and her bright, clear eyes. Her serious expression as she studied the seal made his heart race. Ling Yushio confirmed that it really was a sealing rune and asked curiously whether she could actually walk out of the painting if the seal were wiped away. Qin Mu nodded and explained that he had used bestowing soul skill together with bestowing the divine soul with a dot using mutual sensitivity. However, he had only succeeded once and did not know whether it would work again this time. So it was safer to seal the painting in case she actually escaped from it. Ling Yushio shyly looked at him, immediately rolled up the painting, and declared that it belonged to her and Qin Mu was not allowed to steal it. She then remembered the reason she had come and told Qin Mu that her father had summoned him to the palace to diagnose his injuries. She had encountered the eunuch who was supposed to deliver the imperial decree and had taken over the task herself. Qin Mu straightened his clothes and asked whether she would accompany him. Ling Yushio agreed, saying that they had not met for quite a while and that she had things she wanted to tell him. The young man and young woman then left the room. The dragon Qilin raised his head and assured Qin Mu that he would guard the door and would definitely not let anyone enter. Qin Mu told him to perform well and promised that he would not put him on the New Year's table. He also ordered the dragon Qilin to train harder and remember all the muscles on the green bull's body, asking how he expected to defeat the bull otherwise. As Qin Mu and Ling Yushio left scholars' residence, many scholars along the way greeted them with smiles. However, most of those scholars were actually frightened. They had already heard that Qin Mu was the heavenly devil cult master, a savage and fiendish figure who had even chopped off Ling Yushio's head in front of the emperor. Outside scholars' residence, Chancellor Ba Shan approached with long strides. Behind him were two scholars, Wei Yang and Yu Qinghong, whose cultivation had improved considerably after receiving guidance and benefits from cultivating with Ba Shan. Following them was an enormous green bull. The bull was extraordinarily robust, walked upright on two legs, had muscles covering his entire body, breathed fire from his nostrils, and looked extremely fierce despite carrying a peony in his mouth. Ba Shan stopped and jokingly asked Qin Mu whether he and Ling Yushio were eloping. Ling Yushio immediately became angry and denied it, explaining that her father had summoned Qin Mu to the palace. Ba Shan laughed loudly and then told Qin Mu that he had just encountered Pangong So of the barbarian D Empire and that Pangong So had become extremely strange. Although Pangong So recognized Ba Shan, he was no longer the same Pangong So as before. Qin Mu nodded because he had experienced the same thing. Pangong So had not recognized him and had seemed like an entirely different person. Ba Shan then revealed that Pangong So's abilities were extremely powerful and were no weaker than Qin Mu's. Qin Mu immediately became doubtful and emphasized that he was very strong. Ba Shan explained that Pangong So's 6 directions divine treasure was already close to breaking through, and he could also sense an extremely terrifying power hidden inside Pangong So's body. In Ba Shan's judgment, Qin Mu might not necessarily be able to defeat him. Ba Shan wondered whether the barbarian youth had encountered some extraordinary opportunity. But he felt that the situation did not resemble an ordinary miraculous encounter and instead seemed more like spirit possession. He told Qin Mu to go and meet the emperor first, promising that he would come to find Qin Mu later. Qin Mu then entered the palace together with Ling Yushio.